is I don't mind. Okay, so what I want to look at is we go through the Haggadah in on the night of the Seder in many ways, and what always every year I give on Pesach always upsets me is that we go through we discuss the four sons and all these other people and all that, and that's where we spend most of our time. But what we don't do is spend our time on what really is I think the key stuff in the Seder, which is really the droshes that come towards the end of the Seder. So what I want to do is just look at some of that so we can understand that it's not just a thing to look at, but it actually has something. There is a lot of depth in it, and once we can understand that, I think it'll make a big difference to everybody. So I just want to share my screen. It's just not allowing me. Oh, there it is. It's not allowing me to share the screen as I need to. Not sure why. Let's try again. Sorry, let me try and do this again. Let's do that and then go to there. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I don't know if you can see my screen at all, Marion, but so towards the end of the Haggadah, towards the end of the Magid, it quotes all those different psukim, if you remember, and it says there, Hashem in Mitzrayim, right? It goes through the whole story about Aram Yoved Avi and how big we were in Mitzrayim, and then they enslaved us, and then it says the last pasuk just before we go through the Makot, it says the following: Yotzeinu Hashem in Mitzrayim biyad chazaka, that Hashem took us out biyad chazaka, with a strong hand, with an outstretched arm, v'moira gadol, with these great wonders, with signs and with wonders. All these incredible things, this incredible space of unbelievable miracles that happened, that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. So what I want to look at is a couple of these ideas, because they're quite important. The first thing just to notice is that it says, sorry, I just want to close the door. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
The first thing to notice is that it says that Hashem took us out with the following: Yad Chazaka, Zroan Tuya, Morah Gadol, V'oto Muftim, and the Bata Nefesh is one of the commentaries on the Haggadah, points out that there are 5 things. Yad Chazaka, Zroan Tuya, Morah Gadol is 3, and Oto Muftim is another 2. That gives us 5. Why is that so important? He says, "Vahem keneged hey iloah asher niglu vav." Sorry, nun sharei bina lo etziam. Says, why is that? Because those are the 5 things that come to correspond to the 50 levels of tumah. We know all about that, right? There's 50 levels of tumah. There are 50 levels of growth, and those 5 things are coming to correspond to those things, because there's 50 levels of tumah, but there's also 50 levels of bina, of understanding. And if we can understand how HaKadosh Baruch Hu did what he did, then we can actually begin to, within the Seder itself, the process itself, to actually grow in and of itself. The Divrei HaMagid, Lakaman, the Amar B'yad Chazaka Shtayim, Hem Asara. He says, but if you remember later on, then there's all these machlokas about how many, was it actually 1, was it actually 2? And some say it was 200 and 250 and 50, all these different numbers that keep coming up. Why is that so important? Because the more we're able to expand on how many nisim there were, the more we can begin to connect things differently. We can connect things from above and below, from below and above. We can connect to as many wonders that Hashem did for us. And the more we do, the more we have what cause to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the Marbel Saper says, no, let me explain to you why these 5 are. Remember, we're talking about the 5 and 5. He says the 5 miracles that Hashem did for us is actually coming to correspond to the 5 types of inuyim, the 5 types of difficulties that Bnei Israel went through while they were in Mitzrayim. Because just above, when it describes what it was like for them in Mitzrayim, it says And it speaks about all the different things that are done, lachatzenu, and all these different things. There are 5 of those as well. And so, therefore, the 5 ways in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu put vengeance on the Mitzrim corresponds to the 5 ways in which the Mitzrim enslaved and embittered our lives. And so therefore you can see this concept of zeh neged zeh, mida keneged mida, which of course is an important thing to remember, that is very much part of the whole Seder process of mida keneged mida. There's mida not only in the story of the Seder, but in everything that we're doing, is that the more we engage within the Seder, there's a mida keneged mida of our ability to have a deeper sense of emunah, a deeper sense of bitachon, a deeper sense of connection as well. Okay. So then it says, once it quotes the pasuk, then starts speaking on the next pasuk. It says, I went through Mitzrayim. This is one of the great miracles that happened. Hashem himself went through Mitzrayim. Ani velo malach, me and not an angel. V'iketi kol b'chor be'Mitzrayim, and I destroyed every b'chor, all the firstborns. Ani velo saraf, me and not a saraf. And on all the gods of Mitzrayim, I did this judgment. So it's clear that in this pasuk, there's a deep emphasis on the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did everything. But why is it such a big thing? Why is it so important that HaKadosh Baruch Hu seems to be stressing how important it was that he did everything? So I saw a beautiful idea, and where it explains that that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes down, he's a king, and as the king, when Hashem comes down as the king, he brings with him, obviously, all the malachim, like a normal king goes with a whole entourage. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes with a whole entourage. But what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to emphasize, that even though the entourage was there, he didn't give them permission to do anything. I saw from one of the commentaries that he says, and the reason is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted so specifically to bring his vengeance on the Mitzrim because of what they did to his children, like we would want ourselves. It's one thing to have where other people assist us in certain things, but if it's against our children, it's against our own families, we want to be involved ourselves. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be directly involved in that which he's going to do against the Mitzrim. So comes along the Haggadah, and let's carry on. There's so much here, so I'm not really sure how much I can do, but I'm going to do as much as I can. The pasuk says that Hashem stretched out his hand, bezroa netuya, and I see that. I just want to open up this here so you can see the pasuk. But the pasuk is a very important pasuk. Bezroa netuya, it says here, bezroa netuya zu acherev. With the zroa netuya, the outstretched hand is a cherev, as it says, v'charbosh lufa biyado netuya Yerushalayim. That the pasuk quotes that his sword was stretched out in his hand, netuya al Yerushalayim, was held in his hand, netuya al Yerushalayim, stretched out over Yerushalayim. And the question is, what is this all talking about? So it's from a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim, and in Divrei Hayamim, which is Book of Chronicles, it says, "Vayisa David et einav, vayaret malach Adonai omeid bein haaretz bein hashamayim." That the angel is sitting between the heavens and the earth. In his hand, and he's got the sword in his hand, stretched out over Yerushalayim. And the people just bow down and they become totally contrite in front of this angel who's going to come. It looks like he's going to come and destroy Yerushalayim. So what is this all about? So the question is, firstly, it says that his hand stretched out is the cherev. A cherev is a sword. Now we all know that there were 10 plagues. There are 10 plagues. In none of those plagues does it mention anywhere that there was a plague of the sword. So what is the plague of the sword? So comes the Kimcha Avshinua, who says, he says, which plague do we find where it's a makas cherev, where it's the sword that comes to it? He said, Matzinu, we find that it says, it says, we have this little thing at the end of the Seder, it says, and it tells us a whole lot of different things. And it tells us a story. Umesh Kol Bechor, when Moshe Rabbeinu told Paro, and all the firstborns will die. Nichnasu abachoros etzel avoseim. The bachoros, the firstborns, went to their fathers. Amru lahem, they said to them, begin the Amar Moshe, or Meiz Kol Bachor, v'chol ma'ad Amar Moshe, Aladin, Amar Asalun. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu says that that there's going to be a destruction of all the Bachor. And whatever Moshe says happens because that's the din. He says, what about us? We're going to die. Amru asara banim lachar yamusin v'chad minachon lo yakum alil after. He says, what's going to happen? We're going to die. We're going to find that 10 people in each house are going to die, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings this entire plague on them on the firstborn. So what do? They go halchu etzel Paro, and they go to Paro, and they say to Paro, Moshe said, "B'meis kol b'chor," and whatever Moshe says is going to happen. So what should we do? So Paro says, get out. I'm not interested in you. I'm not worried about what's going to happen to you. So if that's the case, we find that what happens is that the Bechoros themselves start having a war against Paro. And again, it's like a civil war of the firstborn against everybody because they don't want to die. And so that's why it says that there's a makkah of cherev, that there's makkah of the sword, because the makkah of the sword is not an actual makkah, but it's a plague that comes because of the civil war, that the firstborn now attack everybody because they want to ensure that Paro lets them out. When it speaks about, it says yeah, v'moira gadol, that Hashem did it with moira gadol, with this great awe and reverence. And it says there, the Haggadah says that's the Gilui Shechina, the revealing of the Shechina, the revealing of Hashem's presence. So, how is it that Hashem revealed Himself through the Makkah of the Bechorim? How does He reveal Himself? By just killing the firstborn. So the Marbel Saper, one of the really wonderful explanations of the Haggadah. So he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmo haya megale, Hashem Himself revealed, mi hema b'chorim me'av or mi'aim. He says, hold on a second. Well, how do you find that there are multiple deaths within one family? Because Hashem revealed who are the firstborns of the fathers and the mothers, right? Why? Because we understand that the society of Mitzrayim was so perverse that they were constantly involved in inappropriate sexual behavior, that to the extent that there were firstborns, there were firstborns who were from mothers and firstborns from fathers. So you would have one woman who had, say, 3 firstborns, and those firstborns were actually from their from different fathers. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals that so that they can see who the firstborns were, and in doing that, it says right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals that, and what's the lesson? Hashem reveals in the heart of everybody that they should not sin b'seiter, in secret. That if a person sins in secret, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem reveals it in some way, and that's the awe and the reverence that we have to have. That's the Gilui Ashchina Shemagale Masha B'Mistarim. The Gilui Shechina means that which Hashem reveals. That's an interesting discussion. That what are we learning this for? Well, I think we're learning all these things. It's not about what happened in Mitzrayim. What we're really learning is what we need to take out of this. That when we do Averos B'Seiter, HaKadosh Baruch reveals them. And I suppose one of the saddest parts of this is what's recently been revealed to the world about and it is public knowledge, and it needs to be spoken about because it's an important thing. The founder of Zaka and the leader of Zaka, Yehuda Meshizav, who's really has an unbelievable amount of schus because of what he did and the great work that he's done. Unfortunately, it's come to the fore that he's been accused of of rape and of terrible, inappropriate behavior with many, many people, not only with one. And the number of these stories that keep coming up, and because these stories keep coming up, when there's smoke, there's fire. I don't want to go on it too much, but what's clear from this is that's just one of the examples of how, when things happen, Kodesh Baruch Hu reveals that which happens in secret, and that really is a lesson for us in the Seder, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there to reveal. He's not there it's not just simply like a nice idea, but we need to understand that the things that we do, and the behaviors that we have, and the manner in which we engage with things will always be revealed. I suppose we're living in a world where there's so much revealing of everything through Facebook and you name it. Sometimes too much is revealed, but sometimes things need to be revealed in order to ensure that that people are safe. So that's just an idea that I wanted to express. Okay, we speak about in the Seder, and we speak about it a lot throughout the conversations around Moshe Rabbeinu. And one of the things that we speak about is this mateh, this the stick that Moshe Rabbeinu had. In fact, we say, and in the Seder itself, there is a whole kind of discussion that we say over Otot, where Moshe Rabbeinu did these signs. It said Zeh mateh. This is the mateh. This is the stick, as it says. Where Hashem says to Moshe, take this staff in your hand and do the otot, do all the wonders. So the obvious question is, like, what's so special about this specific staff? So there are a number of different things the Ramban brings and others bring from the Midrashim, that the following, and this is stuff that sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. If you remember, as part of the Seder, we do the 10 plagues. We go through them and we mention each one, and we dip our fingers in each one, dump for etc., etc. And then we quote Rabbi Yehuda, Simanim, Datzach, Adash, and Ba'achav. That Rabbi Yehuda had a mnemonic to remember them from. Datzach, Adash, and Ba'achav. So Dalet, Tzadik, Chaf, etc. That's 10 letters. Those 10 letters are the 10 letters of the each. The first letter is one of the makot. So the Ritva says, why is it that you specifically refer to the otot onto the mateh, of the signs onto the staff itself? So he says, because our sages tell us, because the 10 plagues, where Rabbi Yehuda's mnemonic is not his own little invention. Rabbi Yehuda's mnemonic is what was written on the mateh. The 10 plagues were written on the mateh itself. And in addition to that, all the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are also written on in these letters. These are the letters through which Shamayim va'aretz were made. Why? Because this thing was created from the original, in the original creation, the first 6 days of creation. It tells us in Masechet Avot, Asara Dvarim nivru be'erev Shabbos. It says that there were 10 things that were created Erev Shabbos. One of them was this mateh. He says that's why it's called the mateh Elohim. It's a beautiful thing, because the mateh, this mateh that Moshe carried, is called the mateh Elohim. It's not a normal staff that he picked up and carved up himself, but rather it's a special one. And where did he get it from? Says the Ritva, Moshe Rabbeinu received it Bahar Chorev. When he was there, when he met HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the first time at Har Chorev, which is at the burning bush, this thing came down from heaven. And that's why it says, you take this staff that's in your hand. What does he mean? a person that's got something in their hand, that's what they have to take with them. That when Hashem gives him this thing, Hashem says, now you've got this thing in your hand. Now go use this with the makot. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't know what all that writing is all about, but he does know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is given to him for a very special levy, a very special reason. And so he takes this mateh, and he goes, and with it, he's going to do these 10 makot. Why is that so important? So comes along the Marbel Saper, quoting also from all different places throughout Chazal, and he explains that the whole purpose of the makot is in a way a restart of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the creator of the world. Because what does Hashem do in Mitzrayim? He undoes the natural way in which things happen in order to form all these makot, and in doing that, once again, takes ownership of the world and the creation in which he made. And therefore, this mateh, which comes from the 6 days of original creation, is really like a throwover from original creation to restart everything that happens. And that's why we understand that from the beginning of creation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into play that there would be a time where there needs to be datzach, badach, and achav. There needs to be a time where the world will need to be switched, where the normal creative process that we have will need to change in order for Hashem's glory to be revealed itself. And perhaps we can say that is the reason why when we speak on Shabbos, we say like the craziest thing. We say on Shabbos we make Kiddush, and we say, what is it? Zeiche le'etziat Mitzrayim. What has Shabbos got to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim? And everybody makes some droshes on it. But I think one of the reasons is because Yetziat Mitzrayim is also a Maaseh Bereshit. It's also part of the process of recreation, which is why Shabbat Hagadol, the first Shabbat Hagadol, happened on Shabbos. It's 4 days before Pesach Mamish, but it happens on Shabbos because it is the precursor to everything that is going to be the coming out of the Jewish people from Mitzrayim, and that starts on Shabbos Kodesh, because Shabbos Kodesh is the recognition of Hashem as the creator of the world, and I think that's an important thing for us to understand. So let's just look a little bit above here. So the Seder continues, and it goes into the makot, the 10 makot. So it says Eile Eser Makot Shavi HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzrayim Ala Mitzrayim BeMitzrayim VeElohein. These, when it speaks about the hand of Hashem and all the different things that it does, these are the 10 makot that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought on the Mitzrayim BeMitzrayim, that Hashem brought onto the Mitzrayim in Mitzrayim. Well, who else could it have been on if it wasn't on the Mitzrayim? And then it's going to delineate all of them. So why is that all so important for us to understand? Because we've tried through the course of the Seder to tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, to tell it in such a profound way. And if I would ask you what is really the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, what is it? Is it the Makot? Is it the coming out of Mitzrayim? Is it the precursor to Mitzrayim? Because the truth is that when we get to Dam Tzvadei Kinim, etc., what do? The halacha is that you dip. We dip. We just take these little, we take from our glass and we just, etc. We just dip one thing. And that's basically, we do that quickly. And there's no real discussion of the 10 plagues in the Seder itself. It doesn't expand on all of those. So our question is, are we supposed to, as we go through these 10 plagues, stop, and instead of just dipping each time, are we actually supposed to say, hold on a second, let's try and understand what was Dam, what was Tzadaya, what was Kinim, what was Arov, and all these different things. So on the one hand, I think yes. On the one hand, I think it is important. It's important for us to understand because we see a regeneration, as we said, of Bereshit, of the creation of the world. On the other hand, I don't think it's so necessary to really go through each one in its minutiae, because that's not the point of the Seder. The point of the Seder is not to instill only the knowledge of what happened, But the point is also to instill the process of what happens. And if we go through and understand that when we get to the Eser Makot, that we do this dunking one in each with our finger within the glass, and we dip out a little bit of wine, and we understand that that we're doing this. Why do we do it? Because we want to feel a certain level of sensitivity to the people around us. Then I think that that's a much more powerful learning for everybody around us. That even though we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes and attacks the Mitzrim, nonetheless, we still feel with that in a very important way. And that's just thinking about that reminds me of an important part of the Seder, which I haven't discussed yet, but I'd like to just do, and then we can complete the shir. Right at the beginning of the Seder. At the end of the Seder, we express like this with the Dam Tzvadei Akinim, we express a level of sensitivity towards what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did to the Mitzrim. But at the beginning of the Seder, we start that process of having sensitivity. Where do we do that? If you remember at Vahi She'amda, so we go through about all the things that Hashem has done for us and all the things that He did. It was all wonderful, and Hashem protected us. And then it says that Hashem will judge the nation that we'll go into after discussing the Brit Bein HaBetarim. And then it says Vahi She'amda. Now the process of Vahi She'amda is such a powerful process, and very often we miss it in terms of process because we're so busy saying the words. But again, it's the same thing as the makot. Look at process more than words sometimes, because it says when it comes to Vahi She'amda, we cover the matzahs and we lift up our hands. We lift up our kos. Well, we do it for the obvious reason that that's what you do. Whenever you lift up your kos and you've got matzah at the same time or bread at the same time, you always cover up the bread, like we do when we say kiddush on a Shabbos and Yom Tov. We always cover the bread and then we say the kiddush and then we open it up. And the reason is because of it's a halachic thing that you always say hamotzi before you say Borei Pri Hagafen, except in kiddush. However, I think there's something bigger there, and I think it's a very important part of our seder that we miss. And I would like to share with you my thinking, and that is the Mordechai tells us. Mordechai is one of the great Rishonim. The Mordechai tells us that why do we cover our challah when we make kiddush? And he says, you all know this, in order not to embarrass the challah. Now that's a bit of a bizarre concept if you don't embarrass the challah, but it's not about embarrassing the challah. It's to teach us a certain level of sensitivity to others and to other things. And I think that Chazal through here, as we're about to go through a process of a Seder, and remember the Seder really is all about coming together. It's a togetherness space. But in order to come together, we need to be so careful that around the table there are people who are going to say things. It's the big mugging. The people are going to ask questions. The people are going to perhaps say silly things. The people might even fall asleep before they eat. And the people might fetch about the fact that they do want to eat. What do we need to be? We need to be sensitive to all of that. I'm not saying start your Seder, you're eating early. I'm just saying we need to have a certain level of sensitivity. Where do we learn that from? We learn that from the fact, as we were about to say, that Hashem stood up for us and for our forefathers. What do? We express a level of sensitivity by covering the matzah and lifting up the kos. When is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will stand up for us? When is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ensure that nothing happens to us? And I think the answer is very simple. When we cover the matzah, because we don't want to embarrass the matzah, and we learn that we need to be careful of how we engage with one another. Every generation, umdim aleinu, they come against us in the collective. L'chalotenu, to destroy us in the collective. HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu mi'adam, Hashem saves what? Us in the collective mi'adam. So to be able to be zoiche to that type of saving, we need to be able to say, I am going to cover you, the matzah, so as not to embarrass you. I'm going to be careful in the way I engage with you to ensure that you do not feel in any way lessened. And I think that is the beginning of our sensitivity, and that sensitivity ends at the end of the Seder, because this whole Seder is all about Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael. It's incredible what Hashem did for us, Hashem did for us, and that even then, as we're about to dip, as we're about to say 10 makot, what do? We dip our finger. We dip our fingers into the glass just to have a certain level of sensitivity towards the Mitzrim who punished us terribly. even though they punished us terribly, even though they were so evil to us, we still have to have sensitivity towards them. And perhaps that really is, today's the day where the Israeli elections are happening. So it just reminds me of Medinat Israel, and what a wonderful space that is for Am Yisrael, and the travesty of being accused of apartheid and all those things, because ultimately Am Yisrael is not just about Am Yisrael. Ultimately, Am Yisrael is also about having sensitivity to others. That expresses itself within Medinat Yisrael. It expresses itself the way we engage with one another. And if we can maintain that, then surely the matzah, the maror, all these things that we go through, we are able to engage with in a very profound and special way, making our Seder's a space of learning and a space in which we are able to share deep ideas with one another,